neighbors, church members, and invite them to come and join us on Zoom or on YouTube as we discuss some issues that are very pertinent to marriages. So I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to reach out to your loved ones and invite them to come and join us as we get connected to YouTube. I see that we are now streaming, so we will get started. Let's see. Something is off. Pastor Henry.
On. I just
There,
need to spotlight Bishop Garway and yourself. Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And can you co-host me, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. There we go. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families one brick at a time. Thank you for joining us on Zoom and on YouTube. Real Talk is brought to you by Faith Tabernacle and Caribbean Evangelical Ministers. I am Patricia Neff, your host for this evening, and we've been talking about communication in marital relationships, taking a deeper dive into some real-time issues experienced by couples. And we are getting ready to throw at you some scenarios that were presented. So get ready to hear these scenarios. And just so you know, starting last week, we kind of changed the format a little bit to where we are presenting these scenarios, and we're asking you as the audience to weigh in and let us know whether you think this scenario is brought to us by a male or a female member of the spouse of the couple. So use your chat function to let us know if you think after the scenario has been read, if this is a female or male who is presenting this issue. So we're getting ready to begin. We have Bishop Garvin Garraway and Pastor Henry here with us. And hopefully we have Dr. Sutherland. Maybe will be joining us a little later, and maybe even Dr. Seneca King. So we'll see who is available to share their thoughts on these scenarios as we discuss them this evening. So let's start with the first issue. And the first issue is that my spouse does not listen. There has been a lot of disagreements, which leads to arguments, which leads to tension in the household, and which leads to us walking around as though we are walking on eggshells because of the tension and disagreement and arguments. Now, how I've resolved this, says the individual who presented the scenario, is that I tend to put my feelings of hurt aside and put aside my own opinions and so forth just to keep peace in the home. So I kind of set aside how I'm feeling because I want to maintain peace in the home. Audience, do you think this is the male or female partner in the spouse? So if you could use your, oh boy, somebody's already responding. If you could use your chat function to let us know who you think is presenting this scenario this evening. Let me put my chat up so I can see. Okay, we have female, female. Anyone else wants to weigh in? Pastor Henry, are you able to look at YouTube
Yes.
to
Yes.
see what response we're getting on that end?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So far, we have female. Okay. Anything on YouTube?
Not as yet. Not as yet.
All right. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and let you know who, and I think our audience has been really listening and has a um, good sense of who this type of issue would come from. And yes, you are absolutely correct. It is coming from the female counterpart of the couple. So the female is saying, my husband don't listen. There's been lots of disagreements, which leads to really listening tension in the household. And how I deal with it is I kind of put aside my hurt feelings just to maintain peace in the home. Bishop Gary, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, sorry for that noise in the background.
Yeah, I'm looking to see him.
Yes, first to begin,
Okay, we
there's a way again of a woman making her voice valuable to her husband. There's something that I discovered after many counseling, etc., is that men seem to have a what they call an inbuilt mute button. And therefore, if a man feels that a wife is being disrespectful, too loud, crushing or touching his ego, he has a way of just pressing that mute button and just saying yes. And I explained to women that when I've not had any woman come back and tell me it doesn't work, that most of them, if you want to get your husband's attention, you should speak slower and softer. Now, I'm not saying this is that specific person's problem. I can't say for sure. Again, but I would advise him to try that angle because if a man feels that like if, the men could sense tones because one of the things a man was created just like God to function in a realm of honor, and when a man doesn't feel that he's being respected, regardless of whether what he does is respectful, sadly to say, he kinds to shut down his ability to hear because he does not want to feel one of the number one person a man wants to feel honored by is by his wife. And if he feels as though you're coming at him aggressively or you're coming disrespectfully, or not just disrespectfully, I want to say it another way, without respect, because it may not be disrespectful, but it doesn't come to a point of recognizing his place in the home and value. He may tend to do things just to rebel. He may not listen, he may rebel. Again, however, if that is not the problem, then again, I do advise that, sometimes it's every so often a man needs confronting to let him hear the things that you're really concerned about. I explain to women if a man drops a socks on the floor and you spend 20 minutes arguing about that, and every day after service he's spending half an hour talking to Sister Mary, and you argue for 10 minutes, he's gonna pick up the socks and disappear with Sister Mary. You've got to learn to weigh things when it comes to men, because men try to figure out what is your priority, etc. And then, of course, the third aspect, it was really none of those issues again. Then it's something that, again, always treat him like a brother. Sit down with somebody who both of you respect and have a discussion with him. And you don't have to win the discussion. It's not about winning. It's about them hearing you. Because a man sometimes may not want to feel he is lost, especially if he's competitive in nature. He may not want to feel like he's lost an argument or something like that. But he will listen, for most men. And of course, the fourth dimension is if the man is in a place where he's really traumatized and he really came from a situation where his mother and father was constantly at war. He came out from a house of war. Then that man might need some counseling where somebody can literally take him backwards, and he needs to go through a point of de-traumatizing by literally understanding that this is not the situation he's in. This is a loving, caring wife. The wife is committed to his success. She's not there to make him look bad. She's not competing with him, and so sometimes that is, sometimes I found out where people, what was it people were experiencing when they were born impacts upon people a lot, and sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with you. So you there as the poor wife thinking the man is rejecting you. This is not even about you. This is about the environment he grew up in, where it was a hostile environment, where the father and mother was constantly at war, and he felt, that sense of disrespect. Then he may have said to himself, "This is not going to happen to me," you know. And therefore he's taking in front before in front take him, as we say in Trinidad. So I'll put it there for now. I'm back here for now. God bless.
That's good. That's good. That's good, Bishop Gary. Pastor Henry, how do you weigh in on this?
I think one of the things that both parties need to understand is that the way of receiving information, giving and receiving information is different. Oftentimes, we are both listening for some reason, either to respond to the person or to resolve an issue, as the case may be. Men are generally analytical, while women are descriptive. So that you give a man and a woman the same situation, the man would say it in 10 words. The woman would need 100 words to express what she has to say. And I think that's where the problem often comes in, where a woman assumes that the man is not listening. And oftentimes, while she's talking, the man is solving the problem and would have already solved the problem when she is halfway through the conversation and has a response, and he just doesn't have the time to wait for the whole story to be told before he gives his response. That oftentimes is the case in situations like these, where the woman say, I'm talking to him and he isn't listening. Well, he has listened and he has heard, and he has already formed an opinion about what you are saying, but you just haven't finished telling the story as yet.
Well, has he really listened, though?
Well,
if the story has not been completely told, what is he responding to?
well, that's a part of the problem. The other side of the problem is that women are emotionally moved with words. And so oftentimes they think that by talking often and talking a lot, that the man is going to be emotionally moved also by those words. Try touching his head or something like that if you want to get him emotionally moved. But words do not affect men the way that they affect women. And you hear the happy wife. The happy wife is the one who has a husband that talks a lot, right? The happy husband is the one who has a wife who talks less, right? So it's an easy problem. It's an easy problem. I think that once both parties sit down and talk about the situation, understand each other. Because if the man has a suggestion to make, from what you have said, he has understood the problem, and he is ready to solve the problem. That's what men do. They want to solve whatever the matter is, and so they're willing to give they're ready to give a response to fix the problem. Women, on the other hand, they do not necessarily want the problem solved. They want their voice to be heard. And I think that if both parties could understand each other, that's how each other is, then somehow you could strike a balance so that you cut down your words as a woman. You try to cut the story short, and the man, you try to listen a little longer to hear a little bit more about the story. And I think that you should have once you talk about it and you understand each other, you should have some happy union going with as far as the conversations are concerned.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, here is scenario number 2. This is about making critical decisions. My spouse makes critical decisions without my input. This, of course, the impact is negative. I am told about the decision after the fact, when the decision has already been made. I remind my spouse of the negative impact of the action, but this seems to persist. It is really a non-issue because, again, I hear about the situation after the fact, right? And is this a male or female reporting this? Who is reporting that this is the issue that is plaguing this couple. Let's see, use your chat. Use your chat to let us know. My spouse makes critical decisions without my input, and I hear about it after the fact, which is a negative impact. And it has not changed, although I have expressed the negative aspect this is having on our relationship. Oh boy, nobody's okay. I see one says female, female. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I will tell you that this situation is coming from a male, from the husband. Pastor Henry,
It's surprising.
advice.
It is surprising that it's coming from a male, because and the reason why I say that that is not a non-issue for most males.
Right.
All right, it is. It is not a non-issue. I think what is happening, it is an issue, but just as what Bishop Garwe says, the guy goes silent. So it is an issue. He's tearing up inside, but for the peace, he goes silent. Now, that is bad just the same. Right? It is not, well, let me use another word. It's not healthy for the relationship. It is not healthy for the relationship. When you have issues, when you have situations where one person makes a critical decision, something that is going to affect my life, something that is going to affect the children's life, and somehow I am told after the fact, like for a man, don't even bother to tell me. Right? I'm telling you, don't even bother to tell me what the decision is. You have made the decision, you didn't want my advice on it. And sometimes women do this because they know how the man is thinking, and they feel that if they do what they have to do, they're going to get what they have to get done. And you know, they feel satisfied about it. That is playing with fire with your relationship. Literally playing with fire. It's always better to sit down on critical issues. I'm not saying, I'm not talking about the dress that you're going to buy. That's not critical. You're probably going to invest in a car where a lot of the family wealth is going to be involved. And you go out and buy a car without even, you might be the one who is bringing in the greater sum of the greater portion of the income. But please sit down and talk and decide exactly what you want. What it does, it denigrates the position of the man, because as the bishop says, the man has that responsibility to be he has that responsibility to God for his home. And so once he's a godly person and he thinks that he has to take that responsibility, decisions that are made, he has to account to God for those decisions. And somehow the wife goes ahead and does things that, that are going to disrespect his authority within the home. I think that can be very serious. And I would say to the man also, if you you show the same courtesy. So you shouldn't be complaining about it, but you should show the same courtesy to your wife.
So to add another angle to that, Bishop Garwe, what if the woman says, since the man is complaining, what if the woman says, well, whenever I give my input, or whenever I try to give my opinion on a decision that has to be made, it is always disregarded, or it never goes my way. So
well, this relationship, if that's happening, then the relationship needs some healing. It needs some touching up. It needs some spiritual input. The Bible says when it comes to Titus chapter 2, which we take a lot of our base from, it says that the older woman must teach younger women how to be sober. Like sobriety is there right true for the older woman, younger woman, older men, younger men. So we have to be able to think about consequences. And therefore, if you didn't marry somebody to destroy them, you didn't marry somebody to torment them, you didn't marry somebody, you married them to love them, you married them to appreciate them and to work together as a team. So I think about my wife when I make my decisions. I'm constantly thinking, no, I always keep some things in the long run. I'm older than my wife. Like for me, I'm a little older. So I'm always thinking about the future. I'm always thinking about what happens if I'm not here, etc., etc. So I'm thinking consequences of every step that I make, that it will not be a damage to her, whether I'm present or absent. Um, in the case where a wife is making decisions without the husband, he needs to confront her in a very nice way when he's not overly heated, and he needs to find out, well, honey, why? If it's a matter of fact that she feels that he's doing the same thing, then he needs to stop. And he needs to show her basic courtesy, courtesies, that he would like to have. The truth about it is that in a relationship, no, the two of you will not agree on everything.
Okay.
And depending upon who the relationship impacts upon more, I think we should probably lean to that person, in terms of doing it. So if something, okay, I might not like something, but if it's going to impact my wife more, then I'm going to kind of give her the right to make the decision, you know? But however, if it's something that I think then God gives me that responsibility, because I cannot be held accountable for something that I can't make a decision on, And even when I do allow her to make a decision, I have to still consider the consequence of it for the whole relationship. Of course, once a relationship is coming in that place where people are making decisions and not talking to each other, there needs to be some healing in that relationship. That relationship, they've gone apart, and they need to come back to foundations. They need to get Pastor Henry's book on the understanding the value, the vision for the home. Those are very powerful and basic entities that a lot of people miss out when it comes to getting married. So men marry curves, women marry dollars, and it doesn't last. You got to marry with long-term considerations, and when there's long-term considerations, then there's always a reason for conversation. So when I chose my wife, there was certain considerations. So I always have reasons to talk to her. We do have ways, as a man, sometimes I think, our word levels are a little different, as Pastor Henry's indicated. But I try my best to hear, even though I know sometimes you might see me nodding off, But you need to give consideration to your spouse, and I'm really, really, I was really surprised about this was a man, especially the person said, "Oh, they just basically make it a non-issue," because I can't see that happening. The male ego, it tears at a man really when his wife is not considering him when making serious issues. And at that point in time, the man, the man can start thinking nuclear solutions, which you don't want to have happen. Bless.
Thank you. That's good. That's really good. All right, audience, get ready for scenario number 3. My spouse goes from 0 to 100 in seconds, especially in situations where someone tries to take him or her for a ride. Now, I have expressed my concerns about this to my spouse, and I would admit that my spouse does make a conscious effort to not go from 0 to 100 when I'm around. But when I am not around, it happens all the time. Am I a man or a woman whose spouse goes from 0 to 100 in seconds, especially when someone tries to take him or her for a ride? I have shared my concerns, and my spouse is very consciously making a decision not to do that when I am present, when I'm around. But when I'm not there, it happens all the time. And it does have a negative impact on our relationship and on how people see our relationship. So, I see 2 males. All right. Okay, female, female. Okay, it's warming up. All right. So the correct answer, the person who submitted this is indeed a female whose husband goes from 0 to 100 in seconds. Okay, Pastor Henry, what are your thoughts on this one?
So this is an anger problem. And I would suggest to the individual to sit with a counselor. I had an anger problem for most of my life. Most of my life. I knew when I started to manage the problem, I should say manage the problem, when I started to manage my anger. And I can share a few things that helped me to manage that anger. I was used to be so angry that at one point in time, when I prayed, I had that deep conviction in my spirit that I was a killer, I was a murderer. I mean, I was a pastor at the same time, because I felt that if a particular offense was done to me, it was this guy who was raping little children, 7 and 8-year-old children in our community. He would just pick them up in the car and he would take them and then drop them off probably a mile from where they lived and what. And I thought, my daughter was only 6 years at the time, and I felt that if he had done something like that to my daughter, God would have had to forgive me for killing him. No, I'm serious. That's that anger dealt with me. And then I started to learn some things. And one of the lessons that I learned in controlling anger is that you have to learn to forgive and premeditatively forgive the person whom you think will wrong you. The more I practiced that, the more the situations came up and I am willing to let it go. I realized that the serum, the green serum that was deposited in me from a child was actually, that made me felt like the Hulk, was actually draining out. Okay. And may I say that I only learned while we were doing this program, what was the cause for my anger. Because I was fighting from a child. I was beating up people from a child. I was getting licks from a child. And I only learned while we were doing this program what caused, I only came face to face. Counselor was on the program, and what I realized, you may have heard that I mentioned before, my mother, she was a beater. Everything. But the truth is, I loved my mother dearly, loved her dearly. And I could not take out on her, I could not take out my anger against her. So anybody that crossed my path, we would always be fighting. And it was always because of my anger. Simple things, little things got me into anger. And one of the other lessons that I learned in my life, and I share this all the time, is that I discover the whole concept of abundance. And so that you can do to me and I can forgive you because I'm stronger. You can take from me and I can be all right because there is more to give. And once I started to understand those principles, my whole demeanor changed towards individuals. There was no need to go from 1 to 0 if you took something from me. There was no need for me to go from 0 to 100 rather. If you offended me, because I can forgive you and I will forgive you for what you have
done. Okay, Hulk. Bishop Gary.
I never saw Pastor like that at all. He's so cool. I do believe he's the person who probably got us in jail and the pastors in jail.
Bishop, the first time I recognized it, the first time I was probably about 21 years of age. I knew anger was there, I knew I was angry. But the first time I was embarrassed by it, I was 21 years. I was working with the government of St. Vincent, the Ministry of Housing. And they used to, every time the guy who handled the payroll would go out, the messenger would go to the police barracks, collect a gun, 6 bullets, just to give him for protection. And the guy came back the morning half drunk, 9 o'clock the morning, and he's drunk. And he showed me the 6 bullets in his hand. And he started to play Russian roulette with the gun by my head. And I begged him to stop.
What?
Yes, the gun was empty, but he's making fun. And somehow I begged him to stop. And he wouldn't. And he's laughing. And everybody in the office is laughing at me because I'm getting angry. And when I took a swing at him, he fell. And when he fell, he got up and he said, "I thought you were a Christian." I realized, no, I gotta stop this thing. But it took years after that for me to deal with it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the thing of offense and responding to offense is Dr. Neef, is a serious thing. You know, in Luke chapter 17, Jesus tells us offenses have need but must come. But he warned us about this thing about the sycamine tree. And I could understand it. Just one day just dawned on me, what is this sycamine tree? And being plucked up and being sent into the sea. I found out the sycamine tree is a strange tree in that they thought it only belonged in Israel, but if eventually found it up in Ethiopia, somewhere up there on the coast of east coast of Africa. But it's a strange tree where it's fertilized when an insect comes and stings it. And then not only that, the root goes down 30 feet deep. It's one of the deepest roots. As Jesus was warning us concerning the fact of unforgiveness. And I realize it's so important, this thing about forgiveness, that Jesus constantly, every time he talked about faith, he talked about forgiveness, faith, forgiveness, faith, forgiveness. And then when he blew upon the apostles, he told them, receive the Holy Spirit. He says, whosoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven of them. Whosoever sins you retain, are retained of them, or are retained. And one of the things I figured out is that it's important to have a sense of the people around you, especially a spouse, and the things that offended them. So one of the things that and my wife is here and she's hearing me. One of the things I do ever so often, and I've done since we met, is I constantly bait her on her to find out what was like growing up. And awesome, because what it does for me is that it helps me to understand the direction she's coming from. It helped me to see things that she may not, they may not always be easy to point that, okay, this is what is happening in the adulthood. So once I understand the reason, it gives me more empathy to be able to deal with the situation. So what you find sometimes, a guy who's constantly going from 0 to 100, might be a person who found that they had no power when they were young, and they might have been abused, not necessarily physically, but they might have been abused by the way they were always put to the back. They were always mistreated. And it can happen from a parental scenario. It happen from the community or even the brothers, sisters. But hearing the story, it allows, and I think sometimes it's therapeutic, even people talking about their own past and hearing it without judgment, you know? And I think even then as we discover ourselves, we're able to understand why it is we have certain insecurities in our lives. Because they tell us that the first, some people say 5 years, 50% of your character is set in. First 9 to 10 years, 75% of your character is set in. So the more we understand what people were feeling during those periods of time, so it helps me to understand that it's not personal first to begin. It's not personal. And in prayer, when I'm praying for my wife, I pray for her. Of course, I'm praying for myself too, because what I realized is if she does something and it affects me, it also means there might be something in me also. All right, and it's very hard to take out splinters on people's eyes when there are poles in your own. So that's important for me too. So so hearing where that person came from, understanding where your spouse came from, what they're going through, I think is one of the very, very important things. It helps them. It helps you to be empathetic to them, and I think it heals them. In the same story of Hulk, there's one of the Avenger ladies who always seemed to have the ability to calm Hulk down. And when she once But that's because she's so empathetic to him that he normally he goes from Hulk to Dr. Banner.
Right, right.
And you see, but if the person has a pain inside of them that has remained and it has a lot of root, that salt water is what is necessary to kill the sycamine tree. You becoming that person of love, that salt of the earth that you just spoke about, that love situation and that unconditional acceptance. So regardless, I to my wife, listen, we in this thing until you're gonna be closing the lid on my coffin. I hope it's a long time from now. But we in this thing for the long run. Understand? That thing, the only way it's going is if you're gone. Right? But it does mean that if I not don't like something, I would talk about it. All right, because I'm committed. And I
Right.
think when people in that type of situation, it helps them to be able to share more. It helps them to be able to come to terms with reality and to hear you better once they know there's that love base present. God bless.
Well, thank you for that because you've given us a great segue into the next scenario. My spouse has a problem with my past experiences, and even though we've been married for a number of years and have shared and been very open with my spouse about them, that problem still exists. The impact, there's nothing I can do to change the past. I've been honest about it. There's nothing I can do to change it. I have accepted my past and have asked God to forgive me. So I am at peace with myself, but my spouse still has a problem with it. And this is before we were married. Am I male or female? Audience, this is your time to weigh in. Okay. See male, male. Okay. Any more? Anyone else on the way? Oh boy. Oh boy. Hey, I think the audience thinks that this is certainly a male response, a male reaction. Well, audience, the person who is presenting this situation is a female who feels that her husband, or who explains that her husband has a problem with her past.
Okay.
Bishop Garraway, you're up.
Interesting. Okay, interesting. And woo. Okay. I can understand the male ego, but that's why you want to have certain conversation with your spouse before you marry them, and then accept them. One thing I told God is, God, I don't care what the past of my spouse is, if that's the person I believe that you've assigned to me. I believe the worst people on the planet, including Mrs. Hitler, needs love. If there's such a thing, right? And and if I'm the person that you're assigning to that person, Lord, just give me the grace, because I believe that's what my life is for. My life is I see purpose orientation first, everything else second, beauty, wisdom, and my wife has all those things. Those were just bonuses as far as I'm concerned. So I think you've got to come to terms of accepting your spouse and knowing the fact that you have to be mature enough to know that you cannot change the past. And I think, because if a man doesn't accept his wife for the things that she went through in the past, etc., they living in hell. They need some counseling quick, and they need to sit down with somebody they can trust. But then again, too, if the man can't handle it, I don't know how he's going to handle it in front of a counselor. That counselor has to be very empathetic. Now, let me just say to the wife, let it not be that you're telling other people about your situations. You understand? Because sometimes I hear some women, they go on the pulpit and they say things off the pulpit that is in the form of testimony. And I hold my head and I say, Lord Jesus, did she get her husband's okay to say something like that? You can't tell the whole world these things, because while Jesus forgives you, your spouse has forgiven you, people there hold on to their husband. Whatever it is, depending upon what you said, because not everybody in the congregation is mature enough. Some people go on radio and TV and say things, and I said, my God, I was just expecting to get a husband saying those things in public. you know. So you have to be considerate of the man's sense of honor and respect, and maturity level. And in fact, as I said, I prefer, certain things be dealt with privately. And once you've dealt with it, you told the husband beforehand, and he knows that then the man just has to man up and become strong, And these are real things, because I had a pastor call me recently about that, about his fiance, and he was telling me some things about it, but he knows about it. So listen to me, regardless of what the person went through, you just have to decide, is this the person that you see in your future? And forgive them, because we all have a past. Everybody has a past. Some people may not be proverbial Mary Magdalene, or whatever it is like that. But people don't realize, but Boaz in the Bible, who married Ruth, his mother was the prostitute that helped the guys in the home.
That's right.
And she and she did very well, because she married a prince.
Yes, she did.
Of the line of Judah, And they were slipping me now, right?
And that's the line Jesus came from.
That's the line Jesus came.
Yeah.
I said, Jesus' line had a prostitute. All right. He had one who was pretending to be a prostitute, and the one who they thought was a prostitute, Mary. So these things happen in life, and when we go back in life, sometimes the best looking person, the best carrying person, you'd be surprised at things that they have done in private. We all sin and come short of the glory of God. So that man has to up his forgiveness level and learn to appreciate his wife and love his wife, and identify with her on a stronger level and let her know, honey, I appreciate you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Praise God.
So, Bishop Garrett, you said something, and I'm just want some clarity, and hopefully between you and Pastor Henry, I can get that clarity. You said that he just has to forgive her. Well, she didn't do anything against him. Is it forgiveness, or is it acceptance that she needs from him?
It's both in a sense, because we kind of owe some things to our spouse. All right. I'm not sure if I want to go down this line.
Right? I hear where you're coming from.
Kind of expectation that a man has for a woman and a woman has for a man. All right. So that let's flip it, all right, to make it. I would like to flip it for certain reasons. All right. Let's say your husband was a homosexual before. All right. Now you have to deal with the fact that he was involved with men. And he really should not have been involved in that. He should have been thinking about this, preserving himself honorably and orderly to his wife. So sometimes it doesn't matter a one-time forgiveness and releases, and I forgive this, and I forgive all the things that happened in your life in the past, etc. The person may have brought great debts into the relationship. All right. This may not be a sexual thing, it may be a financial reality.
Right.
It may be it can be so many different things. So to me, I see it as from my stand, I see that one, just forgive and accept, the person as they are. But also, if it's something that needs healing, you have to deal with it, because sometimes one of the reasons why sometimes we're afraid of our spouse's past is because we see it as not completed. It is, and will she go back into this, or will he go back into this? And that's sometimes where the ghost over the relationship is. And ghosts are very funny things to deal with, because it's not presenting itself, but you don't know if it's around. God bless.
And the other piece I want to throw in, Pastor Henry, before I come to you, is it seems to me, and I've lived long enough to have experienced some things and to hear from other people's situations and so forth, but it seems to me that it's so much easier for a wife to forgive and accept her husband's past situations than it is for a husband to do the same. Why is that so?
Repeat that last part.
It seems to me that it's so much easier for a wife to forgive and accept her husband's behavior before marriage than it is for a man to forgive and accept his wife's behavior before marriage.
I don't know.
It seems to creep up,
I don't know. I guess you see the problem we have as counselors is the people who have the problem come to us. So I've seen both.
Okay.
I've seen wives who really, whoo, Lord have mercy. You know what I'm saying? But the worst thing I ever did have mine, well, it was an interesting experiment. Pastor Henry, sorry for taking some of your time, but I invited a man's wife to come see me and his outside woman to come see me the same morning. And but I thought I had enough time. Well, I did have about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, when which, between. And but I was able to see the man from two side points. And the real problem was really just simple. This forgiveness thing, Dr. Neff, is a serious issue that we need to deal with as Christians, because people are quicker to forgive people outside of their family than their own family members. They're especially spouses. I found those are some of the most, whoo, my God. I know one lady who wrote down everything her husband did wrong and read in a book. And there's a preaching woman. So that's why I tell you, I know both sides. Dr. Henry, Pastor Henry.
Okay, Pastor Henry.
I heard T.D. Jakes preaching a message this evening. And he said, "For God so loved the world." I want you to hear that again. For God so loved the world. And he said it about 4 or 5 times. And I said, but where is he going with this? He said, the reason why I'm telling you is because God only loved the church after he loved the world.
Wow.
And I said, that is deep, because
Oh.
we forget that. We forget that is the sinner, the criminal, the homosexual, the worst of worst, that Jesus went to Calvary to die. And somehow we allow that gene or that virus that Satan sowed in Eve to come down to us, that we would be like God. We would have God's wisdom, so we can judge how God is going to judge somebody else because of their behavior. And would to God that we would be like God instead of trying to be God. Because if we would try to be God, every person who has sinned, we would forgive them. Every person whom we come in contact with, it doesn't matter what type of lifestyle that they live in, we would forgive them. Because that is what God does. He so loved the world. And he says it's only when you give your life to Christ that you realize, he says, only then that you get to understand and realize how much God loves humanity, but God loves the world.
Wow.
And so the person that you are condemning, and Dr. Nev, the question there about the male and it still holds, because it's a cultural something. It's our societal, the man is running women all over the place, and he is a village ram stud. The woman who is doing the same thing with the men, I can't even call the name that the Trinis used to describe that woman. Right? But it's very derogatory, and they are looked down upon. But God loves the world. There is no gender in the eyes of God. There is no cultural differences in the eyes of God. There is no skin tone in the eyes of God. He loves the world. And so when you come across a person, probably for the first time as a woman, and you hear that he has killed so many people, he has done this and what have you and so on, and God says that's the man for you, it's because God loves you and he loves the world. And who woman wouldn't want to have a husband like St. Paul, like the Apostle Paul? But the man was a murderer. He was a killer, and a killer of Christians. Right? He was at Stephen's death, consenting to the death of Stephen, the stoning of Stephen. Right? But somehow God saw him for who he was, and God chose him. And so I would say to the lady, listen, look at your husband through the eyes of God.
Mm.
Look at your husband. It was, wait, just now, did I get that right? It was a lady who raised the question, right?
Yes, yes,
Right. So
correct.
the husband should look
Husband.
at his wife
Yeah.
through the
Eyes
eyes of God. God
Mhm.
has forgiven her, and the past is taken as far as the east is from the west. And listen, even if she goes back into the situation, you need to forgive her. And if she does it a second time, that becomes the first time because you love her, and love keeps no record of wrongs.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that it's an easy fix. Just make sure you ask God for the capacity to love just as he loves. I mean, I don't think we're gonna get it in this life, but the capacity, but ask him for as much as you could hold to fill you with that love that he has.
Right.
And I think this is one of the areas that sometimes as preachers, we hone in on some of the things that are not necessary, some of the things that are not really important as far as in the spiritual realm. So, you know, the gifts and what have you and so on, they are important. The
Right.
gifts and the tongues, and they're important. But if I have all of the gifts and I do not have love, it profits me nothing. And then finish Corinthians and see the qualities of love. And you would realize that, boy, this is how I need to love.
Mhm. That's good. That's really good, Pastor Henry. Thank you so much. I have to ask this last question. I know the time is dwindling away, but this has to do with parenting. My spouse is extra stern when it comes to our children. And that stern behavior is causing us to have conflict in the home. It's affected our ability to communicate about it. As a matter of fact, we're at the point where communicating about it has lessened. You know, we don't talk about it anymore because I am in total disagreement with how stern my spouse is with our children. Am I a man or am I a woman? Audience, it's time for you to weigh in. I have a very stern spouse. My poor children are traumatized because of the sternness of my spouse. Okay, I see a female, male, male. So now keep in mind, we're asking who's presenting the situation. Okay, got it, got it. So then, since okay, if the husband is the stern one, then you're saying that the wife is presenting it. Okay. All right, so the answer is the wife is presenting the scenario and that the husband is the one who is extremely stern with the children. Bishop Garraway?
Again, I would think the discussion is important, you know. Again, getting a sense of where he came from. You know, sometimes again they tell you like firstborns tend to be very, very strict. Middle is a little different, more negotiation, and little one more permissive, you know, etc. So sometimes again, depending upon where the father, what position he was in, how he was treated,
Yeah.
again, did he go with his father, his stepfather, all these different things, but again, communicating. And I think sometimes you know, the wife can get involved in those situations and help really calm down, especially if it's beginning to get dangerous, you know. You've had some bad situations where men damaged even babies because they were foolish in terms of their anger scenario. Again, and again, seeing if it's an anger problem or whether it's just some understanding of how to discipline the child situation, a matter of skills. So again, I would admonish discussion again here too. And if it's getting really bad, bring it. I always again, and almost everything I'm saying, bring in the third person if it's not resolved. You know, because Christians who are, many times we tend to leave things unresolved that are very dangerous.
Right.
And will continue to affect people for a long time, for generations, because sometimes when somebody can have just stepped in and give an easy answer, um, or work through the situation. I remember, you know, I've worked with couples as much as 18 months, you know, meeting them every Saturday, free of charge, you know, because they didn't belong to my church, you know, and so sometimes you need to get somebody who's gonna be able to help sit down with you, help show you things from other standpoints, um, you know, open up your perspective on matters because no man, I and no normal person wants to be known to be damaging their child. And I'm presuming here that the mother is not somebody who's just giving free license to bad behavior. You know, I'm presuming sobriety again, and I'm presuming that the man, however, because of something that happened in his past or having been given a bad example, he didn't approach the whole aspect. You know, something again to there's this feeling of, you know, I'm the god of my house, you know, I'm the head of my home, etc. Well, you know, the wife is Bible says you have to watch how you treat your wife. If you treat your wife badly, God would even answer your prayers. You know, you have to be very, very careful. A woman has a very powerful position in the eyes of God, and she needs to be able to use that very diplomatically. She needs to be able to use the position first to begin and then diplomatically. Um, so that's how I would advise, you know, looking at that. God bless.
Okay, that's Henry.
Parenting cannot be good cop and bad cop with a child. You cannot parent that way. As a matter of fact, it is always better that the parents have a value statement, how they're going to live, how they're going to rear their children, the values by which they're going to rear their children. I don't think my parents had that, but I knew from a little child that the Henrys do not go in the police station. They do not go to the courthouse. They do not get themselves in trouble. My mother was the bad cop. My father was the good cop. And very often, sometimes it's, you know, it's shift. And by good cop and bad cop, I mean, as far as parenting style is concerned, you have one who is an authoritarian. You do what I say. Two men, something can't live in the same house, so you can't abide, you have to go. And then you have the other person now who is permissive. Everything goes. Anything that you want, I allow you to do it. I was shocked one I was traveling on the train in London once, and this lady had a little baby in her hand and another child, and the child was running up and down the subway, and somebody would have to bring back the child to her, and then the child is gone again. And what shocked me is that in order to get the child to stay quiet, she pulled out a sweet, and give it to the child. And I said, but you're making the problem even more, because giving sweet to the child, you're making, you know, in my mind, you're making the child even more hyper. I mean, if she were my mother and she said, you know, I had heard sit down once, being the authoritarian type, I would have to sit. But between the two, the authoritarian and the permissive, there is a balance. There is a person who can say, these are the rules we are going to abide by. And as small as the child is, if you do not behave, you are going to be punished. And you know what the punishment is going to be. And there are some children, all children for that matter, they are going to push the limit. But you have to be able to discipline your children. The Bible teaches us that we have to find ways to discipline our children. There are some people who say that the lashes and what have you don't work. I am not going to get involved in that. As I told you, I had my full of it. It didn't kill me, but it created problems for me later on. So you have to be wise in how you discipline your children, and you cannot have a situation where the father chooses a discipline and the child misbehaves or breaches the conduct, and then it can go across by the mother and find solace.
Mm.
And yet God made man and woman just for that purpose.
Right.
So that the man who may be the authoritarian, the woman needs to be firm and ensure that in her nurturing, that she doesn't have the child breaking the rule and finding comfort and, well, daddy doesn't like you, that kind of a thing. So that you have to work together. And that's the whole idea. You need to sit down and talk about what the discipline will be, and not just between yourself. After you're settled that, you settle it with the child, and you ensure that the discipline is executed when the child needs the discipline. And I think that would help the situation. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a fine line between disrespect, right? We have to be so careful not to encourage our children to disrespect the other parent by our own behavior and how we handle situations. So I do agree. We need to discuss it, come up with an agreed upon method of disciplining the child and follow through with it regardless. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys, gentlemen, so much for listening to these scenarios and giving your words of wisdom on these situations. We hope that this has been a blessing to our audience today, because the scenarios that were raised are real life, real time situations that many couples deal with. And we pray that this has been so helpful to each and every one of us. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn this back over to Pastor Henry as he closes us out for the evening.
So next week, God's willing, we are going to be discussing decision making. So it's going to be, but we are going back to the regular programming. Hope we would have answered. We would have answered most of the questions that came to us. But we are talking next week about decision making. So get a friend and come with us. Come join us at 7:30 p.m. on next Saturday as we join for Real Talk. Lord bless you and have a wonderful evening. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
Good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Blessings.
everyone. Thank you, panelists.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Sister Leslie. Yeah. Bishop, great discussion.
Thank you. Same on your side. Good sharing, Dr. Neff.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
always a great time when I hear from words of wisdom from